You know, the world has got to be too fast-paced. It's 7:30 in the morning. I worked 16 hours, include commuting time, all night long, and I don't want to build control panels. I remember when I was younger, I was freewheeling, enjoying life, carefree. All I wanted to do was party and have fun. And it seems to me like something in life just got taken away. Does that make sense? You ever want to go back to a time where it was a little less stress-free, a little less organization, maybe even a little more dysfunctional, antisocial, rebellious? That was the days that I loved. A little Sex Pistols music, maybe a little Plasmatics. I miss those days. I really, really miss those days. Good boy. Okay, guys, I'm Tony, and this is the Arcade Wood Shop. Gabriel's here today with me, and Gabriel's kind of the inspiration for this video. A while back, I did a thing. We did a thing, didn't we? We built Gabriel a skateboard. We posted a few pictures of Gabriel with his skateboard, and people kind of freaked out about the skateboards. And I posted a few pictures of my last videos of one of the skateboards, and I've had a lot of requests from people like, why don't you do a skateboard? Show us how you build a skateboard. And I'm like, I'm a little torn in doing that video because I was like, skateboards is not an arcade video. I have a vision for what this channel should be, and we wanted to basically stay right on center with arcade games and control panels and repairing cabinets. But I talked to a friend of mine, Dave Walker, from the Carolina Arcade Museum up in Forest City, North Carolina. And I told him that people would want me to do a video, and he's like, do it. He said, that's arcade related. And I'm like, maybe not. Some people may have a different idea of what it is. But I thought, what the heck? I used to ride a skateboard every time I went to the arcade. I didn't have a bicycle. The skateboard was my only way of getting around, and a lot of my friends all had their skateboards, so we're going to do a skateboard. Only problem is, we didn't have no inspiration to do a skateboard. So Gabriel found my inspiration for me and brought it to me yesterday, and I want to thank him for that. So here's my inspiration for doing this video. My original Vans. Don't get more inspirational than that. Guys, let's get started. You ready? You do this. Say hello. Say hello. Okay, before we start this video, we need to talk about the material we're going to use. Now, skateboards need to be real rigid with a little bit of flexibility to them. So you got to have the right material. I mean, we're going to build an old school skateboard, and yeah, you could go out and get you a piece of 1/2-inch plywood and just cut it to shape, and mount you a couple of wheels and trucks on it, and you've got a skateboard. But that's about the most simple skateboard you can ever have. And we want to do something a little more artistic, something a little stylish. The skateboard I wish I had when I was younger. So we got to choose the right materials. And I always like to use hardwood, and of course we're going to use maple. Maple is for the structure of the board. This is the hard stuff. This piece here has a little wider grain than I want, and it's a little twisted through here, but it's really good and structural. But I think the pieces I'm going to take are off the edges here, because this is more tighter grain, which means it's going to be stronger, less chance of it cracking or splitting. Skateboards take a lot of impacts. So maple is the structure for your boards. No matter what anybody says, you got to have something that's strong enough to support your weight, being thrown around, flipped up in the air and landed on. Maple's a good choice. So we're going to use this. We got this 5/4 maple, and then we have walnut. Now these next two are just going to be accent woods to the skateboard to break up the maple look so it doesn't look the same. But we're going to use walnut. Now walnut is a pretty wood. It's an expensive wood, and but the problem is this is not the best piece of walnut to have, but it was cheap, so I bought it. But it has this area right through here, which would be what I call the trash part of walnut. It's a gum. And as walnut ages, the darker place seems to stay stabilized and may even get a little lighter. But the gum area, the lighter part of this board, will turn to almost an orange, a brownish orange color. And after time, it doesn't look as good when it ages. So we'll be using the darker part of this board, and we'll be cutting it into strips and doing what is called an inlay or a laminate. Now this right here is just purely for looks. This is mahogany, and mahogany is it's a medium hardwood. It's not really hard, it's not really soft. It's a great wood to work with. It cuts really good. It joins really good. It's a little bit open grain compared to the walnut and the maple, which means it will absorb more of the finish. And because you use this, you have to put more coats on it. But beautiful wood. I want this on the ends because it takes a finished edge or a profile really good, and it's well worth using. So stick around and we'll start machining. Okay guys, now that we've talked about the types of wood to use to build a skateboard, we need to look at design. Now skateboards come in all different shapes and sizes, and they have names for them, you know, but however you want your skateboard to look, the design is fine. You've got your short boards. This one has a concave to it. It's made out of plywood. It's made by Kryptonics. Cute little board, very lightweight. Didn't like it, too small. Then you have more of the classic board. This would be more like the 80s, except this one has kind of a little concave to it. The classic boards from the 80s would have been flat here with a kick on the back. You wouldn't have this little kick on the front. Wouldn't be there. That would be a flat board with just a little bit of a kick. And usually they were made of plywood too. And pretty good board. Then you have the vintage boards, like what I like to build. This is more of a art type of board that I built. I designed it after a Chris Craft boat from 1955. That's why it has the shape on the bottom, kind of looks like a boat. I wanted something a little more structured, a little thicker in the middle to support the weight, because I used the mahogany more than I used the maple. And that was the reason for more depth in the board. Now the newer boards, I can see the kids riding, they have the big kick on the back and the big kick on the front. I can't remember the real name for it, but I call it a popsicle board. That's what a lot of people call them. Now this is it's called a vintage board. This is like what we rode in the 70s up until the early 80s. It's just a flat board, no kick, made out of hardwood, just like what I'm building today. We have the grind rails made on here. Now those are laminated pieces of wood that are glued up and bent to shape, so it's not cut to that shape, it's actually formed. And those are really cool boards. Then of course you have what I call the Gabriel. This is Gabriel's skateboard. Since he's a little stocky in the front end, made it a little wider in the front for his legs. He's a little hind end, his back legs fit on there just perfect. And that's what he likes to ride. But I was commissioned to do what is called a pintail longboard. Now longboards are anywhere from 8 to 10 inches wide and 38 to 46 inches long. So that's what I'm working on today. So the first step is once you decide what style board you want to build, then you have to worry about design. Now you can design your board on whatever you want to. You can use cardboard, paper, whatever you know to come up with the shape of your board. I like to use MDF board, because MDF board I'm going to keep as a template because I may want to make another one sometime or another. But all you have to do is cut it to the length you want and to the width, and then find your center mark on the board and mark it. That's very important because your center mark determines where your wheels line up. And if your wheels don't line up in a straight line, your board's not going to run straight. It's going to run crooked. You don't want that. So always do your center line. Now to come up with the shape, it's a little more intriguing. And if you want it to be really, really good, you can freehand it if you want to. Then you'll spend a lot more time sanding and shaving it off. But it's got to be accurate on both sides. So you won't be able to flip your template over so you have a perfect match on both sides. And we'll show you how to do that. Okay, to come up with the shape of the board, I have my board here for my template, and I have a very thin piece of pine. Now the reason I have the very thin piece of pine is because it's flexible and it will bend. And I can get my arch by doing the bending process. So what I want to do is line my stick up with my center mark, because this board is going to have a point here and a point on the other end. So you take your clamp and you clamp one end where you want it. And since I want my board to be 10 inches wide, 9 inches wide, I want to be able to make sure that the board, the arc bows to that point. So we're going to take and clamp it down in a couple places just so I get the type of arc that I'm looking for. And that's a little bit tricky with only using two hands, but it can be done. That's how you get your shape. Now, once you're happy, let's move this in a little more. Once you're happy with the shape of your board, that's about what I want. You take your pencil and just mark the line around the board. Now it's important right here, this is your edge, so your bent piece of wood has to come to the edge. Just mark it where you want it. Mark it good and dark. Then you take your clamp back off and you have your shape that you want to cut out. Now you can cut it out with a scroll saw, or if you have a real small hand saw, you could do it that way. I prefer to use a bandsaw, and I'm going to show you that process here in just 1 second. Okay, now guys, I've got my shape, my profile cut, because I wanted to cut from the sides. I went back and I altered it a little bit and made a different one because the bottom edge was coming too much to a point, and I didn't want to have a really sharp point down to bottom long. So I went back and widened the bottom just a little bit. So now, and since I didn't get it perfect on my mark, and I used the bandsaw, I'm going to go back and I'm going to sand this really good. This is going to be my template that I use on my boards. So let's sand this and I'll get back to you in a few minutes. Okay guys, as you saw in the video, I went ahead and I ran everything through the joiner, and I got the surface flat, and I surfaced the edges to make them 90 degrees. Took them over to the planer, got them all pretty much the same thickness. Now it's going to be planed out again, but I just done this for the gluing up purposes. Then I took it to the table saw and I cut all the pieces the same. So I got this piece, which is the middle. These next two pieces are exactly the same width, so on and so on and so on. The reason for that is I got to find the center mark, so I want all of my pieces to line up when I cut my profile, when it all runs into the same thing. So now I test fitted it to make sure the grain is running the correct way. We don't want the grain running out, we want the grain running in. And that just keeps it from, the wood from breaking. It strengthens the board, makes everything a tighter fit. Then I lined everything up just like it's supposed to be. And I went and checked for the gaps to make sure there was not any gaps before it went through the joiner. And sometimes the joiner will tire it out a little bit. I did have a little tire out right here, but that's okay. That's going to be cut off in the pattern. So everything looks good. I went back and I marked with these lines so I know where I want everything to line up. So now all I got to do is glue it up and let it set overnight, and then we'll run it through the planer tomorrow and clean everything up. So okay, now it's like 10 o'clock in the morning and everything is glued up. I kind of hit it with the belt sander to clean it up just a little bit. But it seems to be, looks pretty good. The underside is still got some glue on it, needs to be cleaned up. We're going to run it through the planer again, bring it down to the finished thickness, which will be a 1/2 inch, and we'll see how everything looks after that process is done. Okay, now that we're back to the bench, we need to find our center mark, first thing. This is the most important part. Now you can go from edge to edge, but I don't recommend that. Find your middle piece of wood here and measure it. And do the same thing on the other side. Double check. Always double check everything you do. And I always like to put one right here in the middle. Just to be sure. Then take your straight edge. I'm just going to use one of the pieces that I cut off in the stock. draw your center line, and all your marks should line up on that line. Now, before we go any further, I got to get some hand trucks, because we're going to take the hand trucks and we're going to mark them where we want them. So we have to determine which one's going to be the front, which one's going to be the back. And because of the way the grain runs, and it kind of flares down, like right here and right here, I'm going to use this end as the top. And so that way the grain should flow with the board. So let's get some hand trucks and we'll get this marked. Okay, now this is the wheel trucks. And I may have referred to them just a minute ago as hand trucks because I'm so used to hand trucks in the shop moving arcade games. But these are called wheel trucks. And you can buy these at any skateboard shop, Amazon, eBay, or you can get on the internet and go directly to a skateboard supply shop. I like the independent wheels or trucks, but they're a little more expensive. You can buy cheaper ones, but you need to, before you can mount those, you have to take your template and draw your line from your straight line, the middle of the board, down. So you make sure you can line up with your straight line on the board. And that's very important. You got to take the template, lay it on the board, and line up those lines, those points on your board with the straight line on your, so draw out the design. Flip it over and do the same thing. Now the reason you want to do that is you have to decide where to place the wheel trucks. See, I said wheel trucks. Okay, the board's a little longer than what's going to be finished out, so we're going to mark this off. Square this edge off right here with a square. It doesn't matter what kind of square you have, anything will work. You just want to make sure to square that edge off. And the boards will always be cut a little longer than what you need. But that way you can determine exactly where you want your trucks. Now, you've got this point right here and this point right here. That's the size of your cabinet or your skateboard. And you want to be able to line your wheels up to where they're 3 to 4 inches from the edge of the board to the point of the wheel trucks. And I'm going to go 3 inches. That always seems to be a good spot for me. So that's where I'm going to mark where I want the trucks to sit. And that means that the wheels are going to set out further than the width of the board, because this is a longboard and that makes a little bit of a difference. And do the same thing up here. Now they actually have a tool made where you can decide how much distance you want in between your wheel trucks, but it's like $100 and something. It's just basically a slide rule with holes in it. I think that's overrated. Tape measure and a pencil and square work just as good. And but we're going to determine the hose placement by using this. This is a polyurethane bushing that sits under the wheel trucks. So we need to determine where we want our trucks to sit. So there's multiple holes in this, so you have to decide which holes are being used. Okay, we're using the front 2 holes. Using these and these. So you need to mark this and find the center of it. And that's 2 1/4. So that would be like 1 1/8. Just to make sure my math's right, you can always go back and check it. Yep. Yep, 1 1/8. Now, you have your line here. This will be for the edge of it. So you'll line that up with that mark you just made. Do the same thing with the mark on the front. Then you can always go back and check it with your square. Now, it may not be exactly square because the edge of the board is not. But that's how you determine where you're going to mount your holes. And that is just a little bit off. One and a quarter, 1 1/8. Well, it might help if I stand over top of it looking down. It looks like an angle. Then take your pencil, mark where your holes are going to be. And you do that same process. You got 4 holes there. Do the same process on this end. Mark where your holes are going to be. Square. Little better. Little better, yes. And that's how you determine the placement of your wheel trucks. Okay? Now, you have to drill those holes out before you go any further, because we're going to use those holes to attach our template to the sides of it. So let's do that, and I'll drill the 4 holes or the 8 holes, and then we'll come back. All right, now as you can see, we've got our holes drilled on both sides, and this is what we're going to do. This is very important. Take your template, lay it on top of where you draw it off your line. Make sure everything lines up just exactly the way the pencil mark is. You should already see the pencil mark along the edge. If you've got everything lined up, you'll be good. As long as you can see that pencil mark. Now, take your clamps and clamp it to the skateboard. So you want to be able to hold everything in place and it won't move. This is the important part, because this is going to determine how your shape is and where everything goes. Now, you can take this, and since you have your holes here where your wheels are going to mount, take a couple screws, wood screws, and your drill, and run 1 screw in. And you want it to be flush. Like so. Now, you can take this to your bandsaw and cut this out, or you didn't have to mount this, just done it with your jigsaw or however you prefer to do it. But this way with the bandsaw, you can use the top piece as a guide, because we're going to use the guide on the router table after we run it through the bandsaw to get the shape. So let's do that right fast and you'll see how it's done. Okay guys, now what you want to do is cut it as close to your pattern as possible. You don't want to cut it to the pattern because I'm going to run this on the router table with a flush trim bit, and that should run this exactly the same pattern as my initial pattern. So the profile will be a lot smoother, and that's why I like the mahogany on the end, because the mahogany runs so far down the edge of the board. And I'm going to just set up the router table, and I'll show you how to run this edge through, and then we'll just flip it over and do the same process for the other side, and that should give us the final shape of our board. Okay guys, this is a router table. In case you don't know what a router table is, it's just a flat piece of wood with a router turned upside down and mounted underneath. And you can make this just out of a piece of plywood and put legs on it, set it up on your table, and use it just any routers. These are nothing special. This one has a skill router under it. I use it for doing T-molding cuts on small items. I can use it for doing pretty much any profile I want on a small item. But for bigger items like a skateboard, I'd rather not use this. I'd rather use this table router here, which stands up a little bigger. This is no special router at all. This is an older Craftsman router from probably the 80s. I'm not using my Bosch, I'm not using my DeWalt or my industrial Rockwell. I'm just using a regular router like you'd have in your shop. All we've done is put a flush trim bit in it, like all you guys in the arcade world know what it is, just for following the templates to get your profile. So we're going to unlock this router where I changed the bit, make sure it's unlocked, and let's get started. Okay, now we have the shape of the board, and although this front point looks a little pointy, we're going to give it a little more of a round over so we can't stab somebody and kill it. We're going to round this over a little extra and then finally sand it, and then we'll run an edge on the board so it ain't so squared off. I mean, you can run the edge with a sander just to roll it over just a little bit, or you can do it on a router table with a round over bit, however you want to do it. But let me sand this off. Okay guys, the skateboard is not finished, but this is the point where you mock everything up to make sure it's pretty much what you want and has the look of what you want, and that's exactly what I was going for. The narrow tail and the wider front nose of it. And I think she's going to be pretty much what I wanted, or what the customer wants. I mean, he sent me the measurements and the size and the shape and all. So I think he's going to be pretty happy with that design. So now all I got to do is sand it, maybe refine the shape. Now this point right here is very, very, very important. I mean, you can take your orbital sander and you can sand it however you want to. And I will use an orbital sander on this, but that's just to kind of knock off the rustiness. The final sanding will be done by hand with a small block of wood. Okay guys, this is what the board looks like before we finish it. Kind of dull, nothing special about it. So we want to take our tack rag and lightly go over it and remove all the dust, because you don't want any trash in your finish. I took the bolts that run to the trucks, and they're holding the wood up above the surface here before we finish it. So what I've done here is when you go to finish it, you can use a polyurethane and brush it on. I don't like polyurethane by itself. I mix up what I call a special sauce, which is polyurethane, turpentine, and Danish oil. Okay? And this is a piece that I saw on the internet for finishing furniture. Now you take those and you mix them, 1/3 polyurethane, 1/3 turpentine, and 1/3 oil. Then you take a cloth cotton rag, dip it into it. Now here's the magic. This is what you want. When you rub it on, oh, look at that color coming through. Can you see the difference? And all you have to do is rub it on. Now, I will go back and put several coats on in between before I get it finished. I don't want to finish too thick, but I want it to look good and be durable. And the polyurethane gives it the durability. The Danish oil gives it a little bit of color. It darkens it just a little bit. And the turpentine just thins it so it's smooth. The oil makes it flow better. You don't have a lot of runs. You don't have runs in it. But what's your opinion, guys? Does that board not stand out now? Is that not a pretty board? But guys, that's how you do the finish. You just slowly, over several days, put your 3 coats on it. Now, once you get like 3 coats on it, you'll want to use my second sauce, which is Danish oil, turpentine, and beeswax. And you'll do the 1/3 same thing, 1/3 turpentine, 1/3 beeswax, and 1/3 Danish oil. Mix them together and you'll have kind of a liquid, but it'll be thick with the beeswax. So you'll want to heat it up just a little bit to make the beeswax melt. And then you just rub several coats on the board with it, and take your buffer on a drill or whatever and polish it, and boy will it shine. But guys, I hope you learned something on this. Okay guys, this is the hardware. I'm not going with the Independence trucks on this one. I'm going with the Tensor, with the gold. We have the burner bearings made by Spitfire. Hold on one second. Let me open this. Now you can see the bearings. I went with those because they are red, which I wanted to go along with my 69 millimeter Sector 9 red wheels and the red polyurethane bushings, spacer bushings for the deck. And that's the equipment I selected for it. This should make it a nice smooth ride with the bigger wheels, and they're not really that hard, so you can run on asphalt or concrete, either one. These are the metal bearings. I could have went with the nylon bearings, but the nylon bearings are faster, but they seem to wear out a lot quicker, and I'm not really worried about going really fast. I just want to go from point A to point B. So those Spitfire burners should be just fine. Plus, they'll look better mounted inside of those wheels. But guys, that's everything we needed, and that's what I'm going to do. We're going to assemble it, and once it's finished, I'm going to go ride. Hope you enjoyed the video, guys. Have a good day.